this is something that advertisers will pay a lot of money for. People would love to know if I have Candy Crush installed on my phone so they can run ads against me, right? So what we're starting to see is that Apple and Google are providing new ways to detect these things just kind of out of the box.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo, bango, bongo. Nick, great to have you here on the Next.io podcast today. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Pierre. Looking forward to this.
It's an absolute pleasure, of course. And Nick, you're the co-founder and CEO of Radar, of course, that specializes in geolocation. But before I start going into a half-decent introduction, I think it would be even better if you yourself gave perhaps a little bit of an introduction and background to what Radar does.
Yeah, sure. So Radar is a geolocation platform. Obviously, we've been around for a little over 8 years now. Supporting geofencing use cases for a wide range of customers across a wide range of industries. Outside of the gaming space, we power geolocation for folks like Dick's Sporting Goods, Panera, T-Mobile. But we brought our technology into the online gaming space about 2 years ago, and really excited about it so far. We feel like it translates really well. We do other geolocation related things as well. So beyond geolocation compliance and geofencing, we also have a maps platform. And happy to talk all about that, and happy to talk about how I got into the geolocation space initially as well, if that's interesting.
Brilliant, Nick. So I find it interesting, of course, that you're one of the few companies perhaps that are operating within the iGaming and online sports betting space today that is actually not born from our industry. So we're going to dive into that a little bit later on. But I wanted to just kind of kick off and ask you about the founding story of Radar. Do you want to go back and talk a little bit about how this company came to be?
Definitely. So the founding team has been in the geolocation space for about 12 years now. We all met at Foursquare, which was one of the early location-based smartphone apps, social apps here in New York City. So that was sort of where we first fell in love with geolocation. Interestingly, Foursquare had all sorts of challenges with location spoofing. If you remember, you would check in on Foursquare and unlock badges, and people would spoof their location and jump around the world and try to unlock these badges. So, Foursquare had geolocation fraud detection challenges of their own back in the day. I was on the product team there. My co-founder Kobe was on the sales team there. Our CTO Tim was my tech lead. So this was back in 2012. We all went our own separate ways. So I went to an on-demand home services platform called Handy. And there we needed to build a bunch of location tracking features, more on the logistics side. So we had a lot of workers on our platform. We needed to track where they were in the field, dispatch them to nearby jobs, understand if they were running late to a job or something like that. And we had to build it all in-house. So we used Google Maps platform, and we did our own, iOS location services implementation, Android location services implementation. Took months and months to build. It was super complicated. And, reflecting on all these experiences after the fact, when we wanted to do payments, we just integrated Stripe. When we wanted to do, communication, send a text message, we just integrated Twilio. There were these great full stack, developer friendly, compliant tools available. And we felt like that didn't exist for geolocation. There were some kind of industry specific geolocation providers. There were some you might call sort of legacy or less developer friendly. geolocation companies. But yeah, we started the company back in 2016 with this vision of like Stripe or Twilio for geolocation. And the vision was always location infrastructure for every product and service. So we aspired to work with every retailer, every restaurant brand, every gaming company, every delivery tracking company, et cetera. So we've been really excited about entering into the gaming space, which I can talk more about. But our ambitions are much bigger. We want to be that geolocation platform for every industry and every use case.
Brilliant, Nick. So the purpose of the episode today is to do a bit of a deep dive into geolocation. And to me, from an outside perspective, it seems to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game, essentially, between you, who are obviously trying to pinpoint the user to the most accurate point that you can, and let's say the VPN hosts that are trying to hide that location for various reasons. So just to kind of open up the conversation today, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing today in geolocation?
Sure. I mean, I think what you describe is definitely a big challenge. So there's this cat and mouse game, and you have bad actors, fraud rings that are trying to spoof their location, trying to get through checks to exploit a given operator, exploit a given system, and it's constantly evolving, right? So I can talk a lot about proxy and VPN detection. That's kind of one trend. I think other trends that we're seeing, and this applies to the gaming industry, but also to other industries as well, is around location data privacy. Obviously, location data is quite sensitive, and so collecting it in ways that are thoughtful, storing it securely, that's an important part of the picture as well. I think another big trend has to do with just consumer expectations. We're like 15 years, actually probably at this point, 17 years into the smartphone era. We as consumers have hundreds of apps on our phone, and we expect great experiences. We expect the location checks to work. We expect them to be fast. We expect the apps we use to be great. And so consumer expectations are higher than ever. And I think maybe the last thing I would highlight is, and this is something we talk about as well, is just cost, right? I think we're in an era where, particularly in the gaming space, folks are thinking about optimizing margins. They're thinking about kind of consolidating, modernizing their tech stack. And we're seeing this in other industries as well as, folks go through digital transformation. So I think you have these kind of, interrelated trends of cat and mouse game when it comes to, fraud detection, privacy, consumer expectations, and cost cutting and vendor consolidations. Happy to talk about any of those things.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's dive in a little bit towards VPN use. So from our industry's perspective, particularly here in Europe, the local regulators here in Europe are very good at handing out very, very big fines to operators in Europe, multi-million euro fines that sometimes can be based just of a simple person who is signing up an account using VPN in a locally regulated market in order to access an operator. And based on the fact that you are able to access this particular site via VPN, they will then take a decision to give out a multi-million euro fine. The operators are claiming that it's near impossible to stop that type of user signing up from the VPN because they can't detect the VPN use. So I want to just kind of clarify where we are today in technology of detecting VPN use. First and foremost, maybe that a VPN is being used in the first place, but then perhaps secondly, is it ever going to be possible, do you think, to actually locate a user who is using VPN? Like where are we in this mix right now?
Well, I think IP address is one way to determine a user's location, and that's where some of the proxy and VPN detection comes into play. But there are also other more reliable, more accurate ways to determine a player's location. iOS and Android location services have gotten really sophisticated. You can do device geolocation in the browser now. And so, we as consumers have seen, I download an app and it says, hey, this app wants to use your location. You've seen that on some websites as well. So I actually think that the future of geolocation is more and more folks are going to be moving past IP geolocation and actually getting this more accurate device geolocation as well. Less common for, iGaming operators in Europe. Very common, in fact, it's like required for regulated operators in the US. If you look at the state-by-state geolocation requirements, pretty much all of them say you need to detect proxy and VPN usage, but that cannot be the primary source of geolocation. You have to use device level geolocation as well. When it comes to proxy and VPN detection, I think what we're seeing nowadays is bad actors are getting more sophisticated. So in the past, I think folks use things like NordVPN or sort of these popular known proxy and VPN services. That's still the case. We license lots of known proxy and VPN IP data sets so we can detect these things. There are some other ways you can detect this as well. For example, you might look at the latency of a request and infer that somebody might be using a proxy or VPN that way. We're starting to see more and more folks using residential proxies. So sort of like a peer-to-peer proxy as opposed to like a centralized, NordVPN or something like this. And those are harder to detect. An example of how this might work is you have a peer-to-peer network where a bunch of folks sign up and anybody can sort of proxy through anybody else's computer that's on the network. So if I'm in New York and there's somebody in California, I might be able to proxy through their computer or vice versa. There are also some services that effectively sort of route your traffic through a compromised device. So maybe I download some malware on my device and unbeknownst to me, it's running a proxy or VPN server. And you can sort of tunnel through that way. The challenge with detecting that is it just looks like an ordinary residential IP address, as opposed to like a known NordVPN server or an AWS box or something like that. So we're starting to see more and more of the kind of proxy VPN IP data set providers think about residential proxy detection. We're thinking about various ways of detecting these on the radar side as well. And I think where things are going long term, though, is sort of graduating past IP geolocation as a primary geolocation source and saying there's a better way now. It's more reliable. It's more accurate. It's more spoof proof. And that's actually using device level geolocation, which is the primary way that Radar does it. We view IP geolocation as sort of a secondary location source.
Yeah. So it would also, like one element here is also how much kind of friction does the operator want to add in order to locate the user properly, I suppose. That sometimes would also involve regulators putting pressure on operators too.
Yeah, totally. I think IP geolocation is nice in that any device connected to the internet has an IP address, and so there's no special permissions involved, but it has some of the vulnerabilities and kind of inaccuracies that I mentioned. If you're requesting device level geolocation, the end user has to grant permissions. There's a little bit of additional friction there. When it comes to iOS and Android implementations, you can do pretty robust device geolocation and spoofing detection just in the app itself in a web browser. So for a web implementation, what's become common, at least in the US, is a sort of companion app solution where if I were to go to like a DraftKings.com or a FanDuel.com, I would need to download a desktop plugin, which is yet another point of friction, right? So the more robust the spoofing detection, sometimes the more friction for the player. Obviously, going through things like KYC or identity verification flows add some friction as well. So players are used to it. But I think we're going to start to see an evolution of detection methods and requirements that strike a good balance between spoof-proof, reliable geolocation, but also really being mindful of player experience. And that's something we're thinking a lot about at Radar. How can we provide a better player experience while still satisfying all of the required geolocation checks?
You mentioned the concept of spoofing a few times during the conversation so far. Can you just dig into that concept a bit further? What is spoofing and so on?
Yeah, I would define spoofing as basically obfuscating or hiding your real location through some means. So if an operator is doing IP geolocation, obviously I'm sitting in New York right now. I'm sort of using an IP address that's known to be in New York. But I could use a proxy or VPN server located in New Jersey to make it look like I'm in New Jersey, right? That's one means of spoofing my location with IP geolocation. If I'm using device geolocation, you can go on the Android Play Store. You can download GPS spoofing apps. You can set them up, and you can basically open up this app and drag a pin and make it look like your latitude and longitude are wherever you want it to be. There are ways to detect that, various ways to detect that, but that's another example. Going a step further, there are some kind of really interesting exploits where, in a lot of cases, a smartphone or a laptop will use, GPS to determine its location. But in a lot of cases, the device will use Wi-Fi scanning. It'll look at nearby Wi-Fi networks, their signal strengths, sort of map that to a list of known Wi-Fi access point locations. And that's how the device determines its location. So you could do an exploit where maybe you're in a Faraday cage and you're sort of shielding out, or maybe you're in the middle of the Costa Rican jungle. There's no Wi-Fi around, and you could sort of set up fake Wi-Fi access points, broadcasting with kind of known names and signal strengths that correspond to a sort of Wi-Fi, nearby Wi-Fi signature in New Jersey, and make it look like you're in New Jersey. And so folks can get quite sophisticated. Folks will often jailbreak their iOS device or root their Android device. So you can do some of these spoofing tactics and kind of cover your tracks. So all of these things are potentially ways to spoof your location, either to access an operator's app outside of an allowed jurisdiction, or to cover your tracks if you're part of a fraud ring or something like that. So all of this is very central to Radar's technology, what we arm operators with, and a lot of the things I just mentioned are actually explicit geolocation requirements for regulated operators in the States.
Brilliant. In the context of this cat and mouse game between you and the VPN hosts, do you see kind of momentum going one or side or the other at the moment? Or if you look back to the last 12 or 15 years, have the momentum swing between these two from time to time?
I think with a cat and mouse game, there's always a little bit of back and forth. One thing that we've observed is Apple and Google care about this as well for a variety of reasons. And so I think what we're starting to see is additional features at the operating system level that developers can take advantage of. And so some of the incumbent legacy geolocation platforms that have been around for a while maybe figured out crazy ways to detect some of this stuff on their own that maybe involved collecting a bunch of data that also has privacy implications. For example, one way to detect if you have a location spoofing app on your phone is to just basically download a list of all the apps installed on your phone and send it to a server and compare that list. But that's pretty sensitive, right? Knowing every app that I have installed on my phone. Or maybe they're just sort of downloading a full list of all nearby Wi-Fi networks and sending that up. This is something that advertisers will pay a lot of money for. People would love to know if I have Candy Crush installed on my phone so they can run ads against me, right? So what we're starting to see is that Apple and Google are providing new ways to detect these things just kind of out of the box. So for example, Google has a new set of APIs called the Google Play Integrity API. And it's sort of purpose built to see, is this Android device rooted? Are there these known, sort of remote desktop or spoofing apps installed? And so Radar has actually built our tech on a lot of these kind of new modern APIs that are a little more, call it, future compatible and privacy friendly. And so I think there's always going to be a bit of back and forth, but I think one thing that's been interesting to us is actually seeing some of these platform providers, iOS and Android, start to give developers new capabilities that Radar can incorporate. And obviously there's a lot that we do sort of proprietary as well. One other thing I'll note, when it comes to IP geolocation, I could imagine that the carriers are going to start doing more in terms of sort of authenticating, this is a sort of a spoof-proof IP address. It's trusted. We're doing some level of verification on the SIM card or something like that. So even for kind of non-smartphone use cases, I think we'll start to see some more, call it platform or infrastructure capabilities as well.
Very interesting, Nick. And I just want to go back again to this example of operators, particularly in Europe, then who are being fined based on VPN use by regulators who are signing up accounts. So I just wanted to kind of clarify this question in the first place. Let's say that you're a user who is just using one of these standard services like NordVPN, for example. How difficult or easy is it for an operator to just detect that a VPN is used in the first place? Would an operator be able to detect that just a VPN is used, not where the location is perhaps, where the real location, but how difficult is it for an operator to actually detect VPN use if you don't have kind of these checks and balances in place that you talked about earlier?
Yeah, I think for the like very popular providers, there are some very good data sets out there. And there are sort of commercial IP, geolocation, known proxy and VPN data sets. We license a lot of them and incorporate them into our service. IP geolocation is sort of by its nature imperfect. You can have cell phones that move around and maybe they cross state lines. So given an IP address, what state is it in? Well, it sort of depends on the last time you saw that device. Some of these proxy and VPN service providers are always sort of adding new servers or new IP blocks or whatever. There's also the risk of false positives, right? You might block somebody that you think has a proxy or VPN server because a lot of these IP data providers have these big probe networks and they're kind of constantly scanning all IPs that they know about. And maybe something is detected and then it goes away, or maybe something gets stale. So I think what I would say is for sort of these common proxy and VPN services, there's really good data sets out there. We license multiple data sets. But residential proxies are harder, right? So I would say that the more sophisticated attackers know this, and they're adapting accordingly.
Yeah. So let's say if an operator really wanted to limit the more average Joe use of a VPN through a NordVPN, for example, they would probably be able to do it, but it would potentially cause some false positives in the meantime. But overall, they would be able to detect most of the cases of a NordVPN, for example.
That's right. Yeah, you could go out and find a really good IP data set, and there's a number of different vendors out there. I think they're pretty well known, and that would do the job. But it's not perfect, and there's the risk of false positives, and ultimately, I think kind of not good enough for where things are going. So I think we're going to start to see folks require additional kind of stronger, more accurate, more reliable geolocation detection as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for clearing that out, Nick. I've been part of many conversations recently where this has been hotly debated if it is possible or not. So now we have the answer from the horse's mouth here. Moving on, we talked earlier about the origin of your company was not necessarily from the online sports betting and gambling industry, but you have also operated in other industries such as retail and restaurants. And I want to ask just kind of how does geolocation differ between our industry and the other industries that you've worked in, and perhaps what can we as the online gambling and sports betting industry learn from geolocation in other industries and vice versa?
Sure. We see a lot of parallels, and I think our tech translates quite well. I think geolocation is very underutilized in the gaming space right now. I think most folks are doing just compliance, and they could be doing a lot more in terms of location-based app experiences or location-based messaging. On the flip side, I actually think that some of these geolocation fraud detection and spoofing detection capabilities are really interesting outside of the gaming space as well. Delivery tracking, on-demand ride-sharing apps have all sorts of interesting challenges with location spoofing and ban evasion. Some of our retail customers, they have these really nice in-store only offers, and people will try to spoof their location to make it look like they're at a store to claim those offers. So we've been really interested in the level. We've been really excited about the level of interest in our geolocation fraud detection capabilities within our sort of classic customer set. Popular use cases that we see outside of the gaming space that I think are going to become more and more popular, probably table stakes over the next couple of years beyond geolocation compliance. One is what we sort of broadly call location-based app experiences. So if I open an app and I'm in a casino or I'm in a sports stadium, I should probably see a different experience, different content, different offers, different shortcuts in the app than if I'm sitting at home on my couch, right? And sort of you don't see too much beyond, oh, you're in this country, oh, you're in this state, you can play or not play, right? So I think location-based app experiences are going to become more common. We power, for example, I think a good example of this is the store mode in the Dick's Sporting Goods app. So a very popular sporting goods retailer here in the US. If you go to a Dick's Sporting Goods store and you open the app, it'll say, welcome to this store. Here's the store mode. Here's your loyalty information. Here's your in-store only offers. Here's your store map. You can imagine that translating to, I'm at a casino or I'm at a stadium or I'm at a racetrack, show me something relevant, right? Location-based messaging is another example. If I walk into a casino, send me a push notification, remind me about my loyalty information or something special going on there today. Kind of the most classic, maybe stereotypical geofencing use case is, hey, I'm within a mile of a Starbucks, like send me a coupon, right? I think you'll start to see more sort of location-based messaging, location-based reminders in the context of gaming apps. One other use case that's really interesting is we power arrival detection for things like order ahead. So if I place an order for pickup at a Panera Bread, for example, you can use a device geolocation to say, this customer's 10 minutes away, they're 5 minutes away, they're pulling into the parking lot, let's prepare the order for them. You could even imagine that translating to the gaming space where, hey, I'm a VIP, I'm on my way to the casino. I just touched down at the airport, get everything set up for me, right? Location-based messaging, location-based app experiences, arrival detection. I think these things are really interesting and relevant in the gaming space. And nobody's doing it today because their current geolocation vendor, really specializes in compliance. They get charged every time they do a location check. They're spending 6, 7, 8 figures on geolocation. Like the last thing they want to do is, pay another penny. So big opportunity there in the next couple of years.
Yep, compliance is literally part of the name of your main competitor here. So, but I want to stay on that point just a little bit more for, as you point out, stadium participation, let's say. I mean, tens of thousands of people in a stadium. Why wouldn't DraftKings want to be able to send an offer to place a bet on that particular game to all their customers who are visiting that particular game? I mean, it seems like such an obvious, straightforward use case. And you touched on it very briefly here that it hasn't been done yet because your competitors are mostly focused on compliance, but it seems like a massive opportunity. I mean, this seems maybe even bigger than the compliance side.
Yeah, that's right. One other thing that's interesting from a compliance or a risk perspective actually is, a lot of folks aren't able to geofence stadiums today, or they aren't able to ping as frequently because it costs so much, or because their existing geolocation compliance platform does it. So yeah, you might want to show a special experience if I'm at Madison Square Garden, but it's actually an interesting fraud and risk signal. Maybe I'm trying to place bets ahead of the feed. I'm sort of front running or court siding, for example. Or there are other types of locations that are maybe really interesting from a fraud or risk perspective. Like, are we seeing wagers coming from a prison or from a high school? Operators are reluctant to ping because it's so expensive, or because it's not possible, or it's really difficult to set up these types of geofences. So in addition to making it really easy to create custom geofences, we have out-of-the-box geofences for things like countries and states and tribal areas, but also for stadiums and schools and prisons. And I think there's both interesting consumer experiences that can be turned on here, but there's also a lot more that folks can be doing from a risk and reporting perspective. So we're interested in unlocking that for operators as well.
Yeah, super interesting. And I suppose it's through this conversation, it sounds almost like we are in the early days of the allocation and the possibilities and opportunities that it can bring to your customers. And on that note, you must have a pretty difficult decision to take then as running your organization. You are US focused today, of course, with most of your customers within the US. But do you also have international ambitions? Do you plan to kind of expand internationally? Because at the same time, you have a lot of opportunity to attack these types of opportunities that we talk about now. How do you see your international expansion?
Yeah. International is very exciting for us. We across all verticals today have about 250 enterprise customers. It's about 70% US. So we do have a lot of international customers today. Areas where we're really focused right now, Brazil is very big. We've signed several Brazilian operators that are planning to launch in January. And they're looking to do more with geolocation, find kind of a modern, cost-effective geolocation solution. So that's really exciting for us. We're actually going to be traveling down to Rio for a conference in February, and we've got 4 or 5 Brazilian operators signed on with I think a few more coming on board here pretty soon. We've got some exciting opportunities in Canada. We work with a few suppliers that are EU-based, but I think long-term we're going to see more jurisdictions come online, both within the US, also internationally. I think we're going to see geolocation requirements become more sophisticated, striking the right balance between player experience, but also kind of modern, accurate, reliable, robust geolocation compliance. And I think globally, we're going to start to see more and more folks realize, hey, I'm underutilizing geolocation today. I can get more reliable, robust geolocation while also delivering a great player experience. And I can do a lot more than just compliance, whether it's location-based app experiences or messaging or maps or whatever. So, a big part of the story that we're telling is, it's a modern, cost-effective solution. It's an all-in-one solution that can do a lot more. And that's really resonating in the gaming space, but it's also resonating outside of the gaming space as well. Outside of the gaming space, a lot of our prospects are just doing maps today. They just have Google Maps platform. Maybe it's powering a store locator or address autocomplete at checkout. They're spending six figures on it. They could be doing so much more than just maps. And so this cost-effective all-in-one story resonates across the board. And I think in general, there's always going to be new jurisdictions coming online. In the US, it has slowed down a little bit. I think we'll see some big states coming online in the next couple of years, but I think 2025 is a year where folks are going to start to look at their tech stack. They're going to look at margin optimization, and they're going to spend some time on this. And it's been sort of a mad dash to add new states over the last couple of years, but now is a time that I think folks are going to pick their head up. And obviously there's, more alternatives available, not just Radar, but other, interesting new entrants as well.
Time for efficiency. We covered a lot today, Nick, but I just want to ask as well if there are any other interesting trends in the world of geolocations that you are paying attention to right now that we haven't covered so far in the conversation.
Sure. I think again, vendor consolidation, cost cutting is going to be a big theme. Expect more from your geolocation vendor, do more with less. These are things that are resonating inside of gaming and out. We had our annual customer conference back in September. One of the things that we announced was a modern ultra wideband based indoor location solution. So today, for land-based operators that need to understand which part of a casino floor somebody is on or which part of the resort they're on, we can get pretty accurate without hardware, but we also support Bluetooth beacon detection, which is accurate down to a few meters. It often requires you to install a bunch of Bluetooth beacons around a space and sort of map out the space. I don't know if you've ever used Apple AirTags, but ultra wideband based. And ultra wideband, we believe, is the future of indoor positioning. So we announced a preview of an ultra wideband based indoor location solution. We can get accurate down to less than a meter. And we're working on commercializing this now. So imagine if you're a casino operator and you need to understand which part of a casino floor somebody's in, or maybe you have a big venue like a sports stadium or a racetrack, and you want to be able to position somebody, not just down to are they on an allowed part of the casino floor, but which seat are they in, right? You could do so much from a compliance perspective, but also from a engagement or player experience perspective. So that's what we're working to enable. And I think we're going to start to see more and more indoor location solutions over the next couple of years as well. Lots of other applications. It's really useful for travel apps to understand which gate you're at the airport. It's helpful potentially if I'm in a large mall or department store to be able to navigate and almost get turn by turn indoor directions. I think that stuff's going to become a lot more common. And so we're thinking about that both, inside of the gaming space and out as well.
Yeah, just as a sidetrack question here, and it feels like, for me as a layman consumer, that just the geolocation of the GPS signal of my phone is becoming more accurate, especially when I'm indoors in recent time. I don't know if that is actually my own personal, feeling, or is there actually something to it? Because a number of years back, the signal will be anywhere when you're indoors, but now it feels more specific. Is there something to that?
There definitely is. We actually, for the longest time, sort of resisted the urge to build, hardware-assisted indoor location solution. And what we tell our customers is, the blue dot on the map gets a little more accurate every year. You watch the Apple, WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference, Google I/O. Yes, there are lots of improvements hardware-wise and software-wise and infrastructure-wise that have enabled this. Couple examples, like GPS receivers on phones have gotten better. There's a new generation of GPS satellites getting deployed right now. I mentioned, Wi-Fi scanning when you don't have GPS signal. Apple and Google will look at nearby Wi-Fi networks. They'll look it up in their database. They're making all of that better. 5G and some of these cellular telecom infrastructure investments are also going to enable more accurate geolocation. And Apple and Google have also started to use some machine learning at the OS level to sort of smooth things out or throw out bad data. Or there's a really cool transit app. It's actually called Transit that can now sort of track your progress between subway stations with no GPS signal. And they use the accelerometer on the phone, right? They sort of know how fast the subway is moving and they can kind of calculate it. So all of this stuff is kind of happening under the scenes. And yes, the effect you're describing where things get a little better, a little more accurate, a little more reliable every year is definitely happening. But there's still so many challenges involved in kind of harnessing all of that power in the right way, packaging it up into a really usable platform, supporting things like, ultra wideband or Bluetooth beacons where you need to actually kind of go even a step further. So we want to be the infrastructure platform that kind of ties all that together and makes that really accessible to companies of all shapes and sizes, both inside the gaming space and out.
Brilliant. It's fascinating to listen to. Final question for you today, Nick, is the question I ask most of my guests, which is, where do you see your company in 3 years' time? You have a lot to work on here, international expansion, the industry is big, you're working in other industries at the same time. Where is this all heading? When we do this podcast in 3 years' time, what are we talking about then?
Yeah, I would like to think that in 3 years' time, we are the primary geolocation provider for most of the large operators in the US and also internationally as well. I think 2025 is going to be a real watershed year in terms of folks either adding a secondary geolocation provider or switching off of their existing geolocation provider. I think it's a combination of some of the macro factors that I mentioned in terms of there finally being viable, modern alternatives available. I think what you're going to start to see large operators add a secondary provider. Maybe they're using, one provider in some jurisdictions, another provider in other jurisdictions. Maybe they're sending, X% of traffic to one geolocation vendor, Y% of traffic to another. And I think our philosophy is like, let's just get our foot in the door and then sort of win on product and support and price. Gaming is really exciting for us. It's our fastest growing vertical right now. We have over 50 paying gaming customers, but our vision is much bigger than that. We want to be the geolocation infrastructure for every product and service. And so I'd like to think that more big retail brands, more big restaurant brands, more big logistics companies, travel apps, payments apps are using Radar as well. And we're also supporting more geolocation fraud detection and also other types of geofencing use cases for those companies outside of the gaming spaces as well. So that's where I hope we're at. Like, we're really encouraged by the demand we're seeing in the gaming space. We think our tech and our positioning and just the talents of our team translate really well. And I, as a consumer, love this space. I'm really into sports. I'm really into sports betting, and it's been really fun. So I think it's going to be a really exciting next couple of years.
Amazing, Nick. Thank you so much for a fascinating conversation today. Thank you for giving your time to us, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Pierre.